All right, so the question is, your father is one of the best bookers in world class. It says, anyways, I purchased a Wrestler magazine in 1975 back issue. He went through a plane crash and survived. Luckily, plane crashed in the ocean, but one wrestler died. Did your father suffer a lot of pain? Did it take a lot of time to recuperate? Thanks. So, yes, obviously there was, after plane crash, Dad went through physical pain and he was in the hospital. But I think Dad, and I don't even know if this question brought memories up to me. I don't even know if I've ever talked to you about it. That Dad, yes, suffered a lot of guilt over that plane crash, and the whole reason was because of Bobby Shane. He was the wrestler that died, and so I've heard
they switched seats.
Yeah, and so the plane crash. Dad got to shore, and they knew Bobby was still out in the ocean, and for years after that, Dad still felt a lot of guilt. I remember when I was like 14, 15 years old. This was 20 years after, and it was the day of the anniversary of the plane crash. Dad was just in a horrible mood, and looking back at it, I think it was just a guilt that
he replayed it over in his mind a lot of times, how things could have been different.
Yeah, and I think he wished he would have went out,
he did everything he could,
that he would have went out and tried to look for Bobby Shane, which is crazy. And I think it just ate at him that he didn't go back out and look for him.
I think the only thing that made it maybe slightly easier is once they had done the investigation, they had told him Bobby had died on impact, so there was really nothing more that he could do, but he still would occasionally, the way he explained it to me is like sometimes he would play it back in his mind. He was always there at some degree, but sometimes it would stay longer than others. Sometimes he would be able to get it out of his mind, sometimes it would just sort of linger, but it was always kind of there. But he made peace with it much later in life. He used to, right around midnight or it was February 19th to 20th, every year he would always stay up past whatever time it was, and then he would go to sleep. But I mean, he wasn't like scared of flying or anything like that. After it didn't bother him, but it was just that he just like emotionally it was harder for him than physically, because physically they just gave him the morphine. He was pretty much out for 3 days.
Yeah, and I remember too, Mom had talked about, it was an anniversary that night, anniversary of the plane crash, and Dad was like talking in his sleep and acting strange in his sleep. So I know that sounds weird, but yes, it affected him mentally, and I think he just felt so much guilt that Bobby Shane had died in that crash, and that Dad, thought he should have went out and swam in the ocean and tried to find him, and so. Yeah.
What about physically?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Broke everything pretty much except his neck. I think it was his leg. His leg was pretty much hanging on because he had like this scar on his ankle. It was like dark brown. And I was like, what's that? It was plane crash, and had his nose pretty much ripped off. Now you couldn't see it on TV. Maybe now in high definition you could. But if you looked up at it, if you saw him up close in person, you would see that his nose was sort of like, you could see where it had been grafted. You couldn't see it on TV, but if you look at him up close, like, what happened to his nose? His nose had come off, but they had to physically reattach it. And then he was blind in I believe his left eye, or one of it, because it had come out when he had hit the water, because he felt something in his head, and he went to pull it out. He goes, oh, that's my eye. And he shoved it back in. But as far as physically, it beat him up really bad. But he was back working. That was February, and I think he was working for Barnett in May in Georgia by then. But no, it messed him up really bad. I mean, physically, but old-time wrestler, they would just think,